Yeah, they do. Or should I say most of them do. Or at least the good ones do. Now, like anything else, there is an issue of quality. And that we do have some really poorly designed amateurish psychometric assessments out there that use models of psychology which have long been debunked and have very little validity to them. Now, it's very easy to take those and then just tar everything else and say, oh, look, it doesn't work because look at X, which is disingenuous. Because if you just look at the worst possible example of a thing and then say it doesn't work, that's nonsense. That's like, in medicine, you take some drug that failed the first stage of early trials and say, look, medicine doesn't work because this study showed that this particular medicine didn't work. That isn't how we do it. That isn't how we do it in science, and it's definitely not how we do it in psychometrics. Okay? The most thoroughly vetted, investigated, and well-designed models of psychology, psychometrics, in personality theory, and cognitive ability theory, and the assessments designed around those are extremely powerful, useful predictors of performance in the workplace. Not just performance, but fit, engagement, attention, any meaningful workplace outcome can be usefully predicted by very commonly used commercial psychometric assessments. For example, so we have now about 100 years of evidence that cognitive ability assessments are powerful predictors of performance in the workplace. Okay? In virtually every role that we've looked at, and we've looked at a lot. Okay, 100 years is a long time. That includes very simple blue-collar, routinized work, although to a less degree, obviously, and extremely complex professional, technical, managerial work, and everything in between. We haven't found a role where it's not predicting performance. It hasn't happened yet. Okay, it just matters in terms of degree depending on the complexity of the role. Okay, 100 years of evidence. Okay, and if we suddenly found a role where it was not predictive of performance, that would be a big deal. That would be newsworthy. There would be huge uproar in the psychometric community about that, because we have yet to find a situation where not being able to, solve problems, make decisions, and learn is a disadvantage. We haven't found a situation where those things don't matter, because if you are hired to do a job, the odds are, it could be done well, it could be done badly, and almost always it involves goal-directed behavior, which is underpinned massively by cognitive ability. And so that's verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, inductive, logical, mechanical, critical thinking, error checking, memory, reaction times. All of these things come together to measure what we would overall say is general cognitive ability. Okay, and that's probably the strongest predictor of performance that we know of as an individual thing. And so that works. And we have yet to find it not work. Then we have things like personality assessments and behavioral assessments, which are more complex, because human personality compared to cognitive ability is just more complex. There's just more elements to it. And it varies along more dimensions. And so, yes, personality questionnaires work. We have a huge body of evidence that, for example, conscientiousness, how organized and hardworking and diligent, focused a person is very predictive of performance. Well, it's less predictive than cognitive ability, for example. But there are other traits which, in addition, will predict performance over and above conscientiousness. Integrity, for example. That encourages people to do organizational citizenship behaviors, pro-social behaviors, and it reduces the probability of counterproductive work behaviors. So conscientiousness and integrity, and something like resilience, which allows people to just keep performing even in the face of stress and pressure and difficulties. That adds incremental validity over and above those three things. And then everything else is going to be role specific. For example, sales roles, for example. Yeah, being an introvert is going to be a disadvantage. Being at least an ambivert or being extroverted, that's advantageous. And so for those particular roles, it might make sense to look at extroversion. And we do this at the role level because different roles will require different profiles. And if you can align those, then you have a very powerful predictor of performance, perhaps comparable to cognitive ability overall, depending on the role and the complexity. And then we have a host of other assessments: situational judgment tests, knowledge tests, work samples tests. More contextual, but overall very useful predictors of performance, okay, across pretty much every role that we've looked at. That isn't to say that there aren't bad cognitive ability tests or bad personality questionnaires or bad situational judgment tests. There are loads, okay, and if you use them, then you're wasting your money. That doesn't mean that the model is unsound. The model is solid. Okay, it's just a matter of doing your research, working with a provider who is reputable and have access to people who really know what they're doing, so the product they give you does work. So yes, psychometrics absolutely work as long as you do it right.